Okay. All right. I think the live is working there, and I'll just wait a second for some folks to jump on, and we'll see if we can get going. Okay, so it looks like we have a few people joining in, so I'll go ahead and get started. Well, welcome back. It looks like we're all set here. It looks like the flux capacitor is fluxing and the K-bar crystals are igniting, and that's a deep reference for the nerds out there. Welcome back. It's been a minute, and the reason for that is right off the bat, I'll just get started and say that I'm actually going to be doing this the first Monday of every month at 2 o'clock. So it was every other week, but the museum is open now, and so come on down. And so I'll be doing this the first Monday of every month now at 2 o'clock. So it's great to see you again, and I got some cool stuff to show you. And so let's dive right in. Let's check it out. So the first thing I'm going to show you this. I'm going to pull this out here. I noticed a lot of people have been imbibing lately, you know. So here we go. Here is what is this? What have we got going on here? It's a Cirsa 1730s wine bottle and seal. There actually is a seal in here, and I'll show you that in a minute. And this is pretty cool. So this is like those old school, you know, when you go to like an artisan shop or something like that, and they have a reproduction of one of these, you know, because they're all fancy and artsy looking. Well, this is the real thing. This is the real deal. So I'll hold this up here. It was found by the great-great-grandson of James Monroe, Lawrence Hughes, when he was doing a amateur survey of the Monroe birthplace. And, you know, if you look at it, okay, obviously one of the things that sort of pops out is it's not very even, right? So the irregularity of the shape, as well as the extensive push-up at the base, and I'll show you that, you know, tells me that it was hand-blown. What do I mean by that? What do I mean hand-blown? Well, it's really cool. If you've ever seen a glass blower do it, or if you haven't seen a glass blower make a bottle, I really recommend checking it out. There's some cool videos on YouTube. It's a really neat process, but this tells me that this was hand blown and not made in a mold. You know, not done in that fashion. So this was hand done, obviously. You know, 1730s. You see sort of the irregularity of it, and you look up at the you see the top. There's sort of an irregular shape going on up there. So this is old school. This is a drinking wine from back in the old days. But what's kind of interesting, and you see this, and people wonder about these. You see this sort of kick at the end here. And I'll talk about it in a minute. So the way that they would make this is really pretty interesting. The glass blower. They have what they call the furnace, right? Okay, so it's really pretty cool. They have this furnace of molten glass, and if you've ever seen it live, you could see it. There's this big crucible of molten glass, and they'll have their blowpipe, right? So they have this long metal pipe, and people are like, well, wouldn't that burn them up? It's like, well, actually, the metal will only heat so far. You know, if you have like a good 5-foot pipe or 4-foot pipe or something like that, well, it wouldn't be 4, more like 3. You know, the heat's not going to extend all the way down and burn your lips. It's going to stop at a certain point. So you're okay with that metal pipe. And what they would do, and you see them do it, they'll dip into the metal glass. And this is what's really, really cool, is because back in the day, and the way that they do it now is pretty much exactly the same. You know, back in the day they wouldn't use propane, you know, or propane forge or anything, but it's basically exactly the same. And it's so cool if you think about it on these artisan glass blowers. And so they'll dip it into the molten level, into the molten, not lava, into the molten glass, and they will pull up. And you see on the end of it, there would be this big ball of glass, right? This liquid glass. It sort of just forms on the end there, okay? And they'll start shaping it, and they'll turn it so they keep it a little bit even. And they'll start blowing into it, and it blows it out just like you would blow a bubble, like with chewing gum. So it's kind of the same concept. It would just blow out exactly how it was, because at that point, the glass is molten, okay? So they just blow it out, and it would get bigger and bigger, and then they would start shaping it. Okay, they have different tools for that. You know, they have pinchers, tweezers to sort of ship off the ends, shape the end, and then they have flats, called marvers. these big metal flats, and they're basically just pieces of metal steel, and they could shape it on those without getting it burned up too bad or anything like that. And so they'll start shaping it, and you know, you'll see it. A really skilled glass blower can get it to a pretty good shape, and usually pretty even. This one is not terribly even. You know, I don't know if that was the skill of the glass blower or anything, but it's not terribly even. But it sort of adds to the character, you know. It makes it alive. History is alive. So that's how they would do it, and you can see it to this day. I recommend, you know, as I said, checking out some of these videos that you see and going from there. Now, here's the kick. Oh, no pun intended. That was a terrible pun. All right, so this right here, you see this in the end. Well, you see that indentation there? Well, that's called the kick. Okay. And a lot of people wonder about that. It's like, why does that exist? Why is that a thing? Well, there's sort of various sort of reasons, possible reasons for it to be there. You know, one is strength, you know, to add a little bit of extra strength on the bottom there. And another is that it's sort of interesting. What is that if it's stacked? Okay, if you're stacking your wine bottles vertically, or excuse me, not if you're doing them, if they're laying horizontally, but they're stacked vertically, you can turn them much easier with your thumb and forefinger if you have an indentation, right? So if you have this big, you know, big wall of wine bottles, which I know some of you do out there, if you have this big wall, you'll see that you can turn these easier, you know, to move the sediment around it, you know, so that it doesn't get too settled. And so you can, that's one possible reason for to have the kick in there, you know, the thumb and forefinger. Another one is a little more utilitarian. If you place it flat on the ground, especially back in those days when things were hand blown, you know, the irregularity that you'd see on them, you know, if you sit it flat on the bottom, it's more likely to be flat and not rock back and forth. There's this indentation here on the bottom. And so, you know, and so it kind of makes sense, right? It's sort of logical if you think about it that way. So, you know, various reasons for that, but there's the kick, there it is, and that tells you that it's old school and it's hand blown and all that sort of thing. And you still see these kicks today, all these years later. Let me show you the seal. Okay, all right, let me show you this though real quick. See, they cut this at some point. I didn't do it. At some point, previous exhibitors cut out the seal from the bottle for better display purposes. I don't know why they did that. I'm not going to even guess. But that's what they did. So there it is. But this seal, you want to talk about providence. Okay, so this seal, here it is. It was removed sometime in the mid-20th century. But it is a circular seal. And look at that. By all means, it says A. Monroe, which stands for Andrew Monroe, the sheriff of Westmoreland County and an ancestor of James Monroe. He was the sheriff of Westmoreland County in the 1730s. And he's grandfather to James Monroe. Now, the practice of affixing, can you see that? The practice of affixing seals in bottles, you know, it rose in the 17th century and continued well into the 1800s. And, you know, and it's still a little bit today, a little sporadic today. The bottle and seal are likely British or Dutch in origin. So that's sort of something that you see today. I don't know, someone who has a lot of money maybe can have their own seal on a wine or something like that. So there it is, which is kind of cool because in the museum world, it helps you pour too. There you go. Beautiful. Thank you, Barb. Yeah, there you go. We're talking about the kick on the inside. So you talk about providence. A lot of the things with being a curator is you have to do a lot of investigation and mystery solving. And that's what I love about the fact that there's a seal on the bottle. It kind of gives no mystery to who the seal belonged to. So that's pretty, or who the bottle belonged to. So that's pretty cool. Okay, so there's that. Let me flip this aside here. Let me show you this. So a lot of people, you know, I'll get into this in another session about what people drank back in the day. But I wanted to show you this. You know, this is, you were talking about, you know, alcoholic beverages here. This is a recipe that was on the inside cover of Mariah Monroe's music book. We have her music book, and I'll show you that in another session too, because I wanted to have that its own session. But this is a music book that she had, and written on the inside of the music book is a recipe, and it's so faint that you can hardly see it. So it's kind of another one of those cool sort of museum mysteries that we came across. but we used fancy schmancy ultrasound, no, not ultrasound, but a negative with Photoshop to pull up the recipe and to sort of show what the recipe was on the inside. And so there, you can see there's the book, there's the inside of the book. You really can't see the recipe, but if you contrast it with Photoshop, you can pull it up really good. And so this is a recipe for bitters, and I'm going to read this to you, okay? And I love this. All right, so it's, you know, it's an alcoholic. What were bitters? Bitters were an alcoholic drink, right? Flavored with herbal essences, commonly used for digestion, things like that. So although bitters is mostly faded over time, or the recipe is mostly faded over time, here it is. The recipe for the bitters on the inside of Mariah Monroe's music book, drum please, is as follows. 2 ounces of gentian root, 1 dose of bitter orange peel, 1 dose for those with old family recipes. I guess you know what a dose is. 1/2 dose of Virginia snake root, 1/2 dose of calamus, a few calomile flowers, 1 quart, in question mark, of brandy. Let the above ingredients stand for 2 or 3 days in a bottle, then swallow 10 minutes before dinner with 1/3 of a wine glass mixed with 2/3 of water. So I love that, because in order to cure the digestion, they're going to ask you to swallow this bitters recipe 10 minutes before dinner, just in case you don't tear yourself up, whatever you're eating. So I'm sorry I'm laughing, but I just think this is so funny. But the great part of this is that, you know, along with this slightly alcoholic bitter drink, they want you to drink it with 1/3 of a wine glass mixed with 2/3 water. So there you go. One of these great cure-alls from back in the day, a cure-all for digestion, the great bitter recipe that is in Mariah Monroe's music book. So there you have it. Okay, so now I'm going to do a complete non sequitur, because it's my birthday today and I'm allowed to do a non sequitur. This is a non sequitur, but in last week's newsletter, I talked, and I've been getting some questions about this. I talked about how to preserve your family letters, your antique letters, your letters that you may have treasured. You know, it doesn't even have to be antique. Maybe someone wrote something right now that you find that you want to treasure forever. And so I'm just going to talk a little bit more about that, because I've been having some questions about it and people want to know some more information. Let's just, first of all, I'll pull out a letter here. Here's our archival box. And the thing you're going to hear a lot is archival quality, acid-free. You're going to hear that a whole lot. Let's just pick out a random letter. Let's pick one out here. All right, how about this one? No, not that one. These are all to Monroe. Let's get one from Monroe. Here we go. Okay. Handwritten letter, dated 1797. All right, so this is an oldie. This is kind of old. I'll just pull this out a little bit. And let me take my gloves off. So the question a lot of people have is about gloves and handling old letters. Well, I'm not going to touch the letter much. I'm not going to touch it at all, actually. I'm just going to show it to you. But a lot of times if you wear the gloves while you're doing the letters, it's better just to keep your hands clean and handle them that way, because the gloves can kind of tear them up a little bit sometimes. So you want to be a little bit careful of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to actually touch the letter that's in here. Oh, this is my bad. These are all copies. These are not actual originals. Let me pull out an original, because I want you to see an original. Hey, it's my birthday. I'm allowed to make mistakes. That's right. I'm going to milk it for all it's worth. All right, here's a handwritten letter to Monroe from John Beckley of New York. Okay, here we go. Just going to pull this up here. You can see this. Okay. Just going to see this. Here's a handwritten letter. Okay, so what do you do with these? If you have old letters, what do you do? Well, the first thing is you want to store them away from light. Okay, because light is your main enemy. There's light in here. We don't like that. Light is your main enemy. So you want to store it away from light as much as you possible. That means keeping them away from windows, keeping them away from even electrical lighting if you can. So light is your #1 enemy. Okay. The other thing is to store them flat. All right, flat. What do I mean? In acid-free archival posters. There's that term again, acid-free. You want to store them flat because if you store them folded, see this is all flat, right? If you store them folded, like you got them in the mail, they're usually folded, right? So if you want to store them folded, then the creases are going to add damage over time. And if you look at old letters, most of the damage is in where those creases where they are. So if you can, gently flatten them out. Do it as gently as you possible, and remove any staples or paper clips, things like that, because these can cause damage over time. So if you notice, these are stored nice and flat in archival papers. Now here's one that you've heard me say before, but keep them in the house proper. And what I mean by that is don't put them up in the attic, and I've said this before, and I'll say it again, keeping them up in the attic, or don't keep them up in the attic or the basement or outside sheds if you can. All right, I know that's impossible sometimes for some folks, but if you can, keep them in the house proper, like in your bedroom, in a closet in your bedroom, or closet off to the side of the living room or something like that, because most homes typically are going to have those environments a little bit more stable. The temperature, a lot of people have AC. Even if you don't have AC, it's typically going to be more stable. The temperature is going to be a little more constant, the humidity a little more constant than it would up in the attic, right, or in the basement or something like that. So that's the reason for that. Okay. And so if you want to display them, obviously the best thing to do is to store them, not display them, but that's not going to be the case a lot of times. So if you want to display them, make sure that you put them in UV protectant glass in the frame and with acid-free mats. Now, here's the good news. The good news is that a lot of framers these days offer those services. Okay, they offer those conservation services. So you're going to have a little bit better luck framing them these days, because a lot of the framers are now savvy to doing archival practices. So if you do that, bring it to the framer and say you want it in UV protecting glass and you want it with acid-free materials and all that stuff, and I'm sure they'd be more than happy to comply for you. So anyway, those are just some basic tips for keeping your letters nice and safe in this day and age. And to sum up, let me show you. To sum up, what I showed you is this bottle, which I love, this old wine bottle that belonged to Andrew Monroe, who was the grandfather of James Monroe. So this is about 1730s. So this is an old school wine bottle. Maybe, I don't know, Jack Sparrow would have drank out of this or something like that. You never know. And along with the bottle was the seal that actually says on there, Andrew A. Monroe, which gives no doubt as to who the bottle belonged to. And then I showed this recipe for bitters, which is on the inside of the music book. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. We really do appreciate all your support. We have some cool events coming up. We have one coming up this week at Typesets. Excuse me. Check our Facebook page, and you'll see you can go right above this thing, and you can see our event page, and you can see the events that we have coming up. We appreciate all of your support. And like I said, I'll be doing this every Monday, the first Monday of every month at 2 o'clock. So thank you again so much for joining me, and we will see you next time. All right, bye.